And the NLG, along with the National Union of the Homeless, are really happy that all of our speakers are here and all of our participants to be a part of this important discussion. And today what we're going to be talking about is revolutionary lawyering, homeless self-organizing, and systemic change, what COVID-19 has taught us and where we go from here. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Alicia Kuhl, the president of the Santa Cruz Homeless Union, to get us started.
Thank you so much. I had to unmute myself. I hope everyone can hear me. Welcome on behalf of the National Union of the Homeless. My name is Alicia Kuhl. I'm the president of the Santa Cruz chapter of the National Union of the Homeless, and I'm also the legal director of the National Union of the Homeless, but I'm not a lawyer. And the reason for that is that we feel it's important that the homeless basically represent ourselves. We feel that it's an important aspect that the work stays focused on building the movement for full and fair housing and recognizes the importance of ensuring that poor and homeless themselves lead the struggle. And today, the purpose of the gathering is to talk about how we as members of the legal community and grassroots leaders of the homeless community, is someone talking?
Oh.
Go ahead, Crystal, I'll get it.
You're on mute, Crystal.
Alicia, you're muted now.
Can you guys hear me?
Now we can.
You didn't hear anything I said?
Start the last little bit.
Oh my God. Okay, I'll start over. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome on behalf of the National Union of the Homeless. My name is Alicia Kuhl. I'm the president of the Santa Cruz chapter of the National Union of the Homeless. And I'm also the legal director of the National Union of the Homeless, but I'm not a lawyer. The reason for that is that the union feels it's important that the legal aspect of the work stays focused on building a movement for full and fair housing and recognizes the importance of ensuring that the poor and homeless themselves lead the struggle. The purpose of today's gathering is to talk about how we as members of the legal community and grassroots leaders of the homeless community collaborate so that we can use these day-to-day battles to build a movement to actually end homelessness. And with that, I would like to introduce Anthony Prince, is our lead organizer, general counsel for the National Union of the Homeless. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah and Alicia, for introducing as the co-hosting organizations, welcoming everyone to the event. I think we also want to hear, before I open things up as a moderator, we do want to hear some a greeting also from our National Lawyers Guild newly elected vice president. So before I get to the business of getting the program underway, Jalisa, I want to introduce Jalisa Milton. She was recently elected Guild Vice President. She originally hails from New York, but she's down in Montgomery, Alabama, where she's doing some outstanding work, has direct experience with the kind of issues we're going to wrestle with tonight. So Jalisa, welcome, and let's hear some opening remarks from you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jalisa Milton. I'm an attorney and a social worker. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, but like Anthony said, I was born in New York. I am currently the vice president of Lawyers Guild, which is association of radical lawyers, law students, legal workers, and jailhouse. And I am also a founder of Black Lives Matter Birmingham chapter, a survivor of police violence, and I do work with disability rights in the rural Black Belt region of Alabama. So I mean, one of the models we have at the Guild is that human rights are above property interests. So like I'm really passionate about just being in a space where we can do political education like this. So I'm really excited for this conversation, and it's really nice to meet everyone I haven't met yet.
Okay, thank you, Jalisa. And we have a couple of other special guest speakers, but we're going to hold off on them for a little bit. So let me again extend my own welcome to all of you. I think we meet tonight. We all know that we meet tonight at a moment of great danger, but also great opportunity. And I think, again, the question before us is not an easy question to answer. And that is, how do we participate in these day-to-day struggles for survival against poverty and homelessness on the street corners, the camps, and the courtrooms, but in such a way as to build a durable movement for actual and not just rhetorical, systemic, indeed revolutionary change. And I was struck today by the news where a number of the chief executive officers of all kinds of corporations, Walgreens, Amazon, General Motors, Apple, Dell, Target, Walmart, the National Business Roundtable, all talking about systemic change in light of the George Floyd verdict. But I don't think the kind of systemic change they're talking about is the kind of systemic change that we're talking about, because we understand that all of these issues are deeply rooted in the economic system that we have and have to be addressed fundamentally. So what we want to do is especially in tonight's discussion, we want to particularly summarize what we've learned, our learned experience, and we also want to look a little bit into the future. We want to think of ourselves as architects and not just reporters, but as creators of a new paradigm, a new American revolutionary legal paradigm, which has its roots in history, but we now have to move it forward in these new conditions. And particularly in the last year, where we've had some significant experience on the ground and in the courtroom around COVID-19. So what we're going to do as we go forward is to have, once we get into our panel, and as the panelists are speaking and a question occurs to you, or at any point before we get to our breakout sessions and to our general discussion plenary session, feel free to put into the chat a question. You could direct it at a particular panelist or speaker or the entire panel. And we'll have Kristen Colangelo, who is our National Union Organizational Secretary, and she's our technical assistant or technical chief tonight. She will then convey those questions when we get to that part of the program. So with that, I don't want to delay things anymore. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, and she is someone that many of us have heard about, and I've had the privilege and honor to work with for the last 2.5 years, and that is the president of our Sacramento Homeless Union, Crystal Sanchez. Crystal?
Thanks, Anthony. Okay, so my name is Crystal Sanchez, and I'm the president of the Sacramento Homeless Union and SACSU, and I'm one of the Western Regional Directors for the National Union of the Homeless. And I apologize, my audio is not, or my video is not working at this time. So we're in a race with time to find justice in an unjust system. March 2020, when COVID-19 flourished, access became nearly impossible. The Sacramento Homeless Union and its members became in survival mode. Not that we weren't already in survival mode, but COVID exacerbated the situation. We immediately jumped into action, in which other community members came together with us, and we created a coalition called SACSU, which stands for Sacramento Solidarity of Unhoused People. We developed medical teams, while the CDC and local officials exempted our unhoused communities. Under orders of shelter in place and wash your hands and wear masks, the city of Sacramento and the county of Sacramento again exempted the unhoused. We created ramped up mutual aid, distributing food necessities, hand washing stations, and more, while our city and county proceeded to sweep, displace, and create harm to our unhoused neighbors. We documented, we took statements, we stood outside and took pictures and videos. We trained our union members on how to document for themselves as well. We have been arrested, we've been retaliated against for documenting and standing up. We civilly asked our city and county to cease and desist from the abusive, immoral actions that they were taking against a part of a community who was the most exposed and vulnerable to COVID-19. We had enough. We stood up. When they refused to cease and desist, we took them to court. The city lied in the court and was caught in their own wording by the judge. And I quote, "We are not moving people around," as the front cover of the Sacramento Bee shows police moving people around with no masks. We won a writ of mandate to enforce the city of Sacramento to comply with the public health order, which included to stop taking people's belongings or moving them. And they were no longer allowed to cite, ticket, tag RVs or anything else considered shelter. As we fight statewide against injustice, the cruel and unusual punishment, the public health crisis, and the immoral actions of our local authorities, our state and nationally, we must continue to fight legally against the system that was built to work against us. We must take our talents, our degrees, and come together and push forward in a movement on the right side of history. We must fight for housing now and no more death on the streets, because we are homeless, not helpless, and we will continue to fight united. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Crystal. Let me just say that Crystal Sanchez has usually a lot more to say than in the few minutes you just heard from her. So we're looking to her to have a lot more and share a lot of the experience we've developed in particularly Northern California and Sacramento Valley especially. So let's move right along. And again, the speakers, each of you have between 5 and 6 minutes, and we'll have more opportunities to interact and discuss in the second half of our event tonight. But I want to introduce next from the Center for Law and Poverty, the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty. She is the director of the Economic Equity Office of that very important legal organization. They're a fighting organization down in New Mexico, in both in urban and rural areas of the state, which present real challenges. And so let me introduce to you all the director, Maria Griego. Maria?
Thank you, Anthony. Yes, as Anthony said, my name is Maria Griego, and I work with the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty. We are a nonprofit law firm and advocacy organization, and we have 5 legal teams that work on various civil rights issues. We do mostly systemic litigation and policy work, and I am the director of the Economic Equity team. And the housing work we do falls under that team. And I've been asked to share with you sort of what we do on a day-to-day basis, both past, present, and future work. And so to be upfront, the center has only been working on housing issues for 2 years. In the first year, we really didn't know where we should be dedicating our time and energy. And so we spent a lot of time that first year talking to community members, talking to other advocates, trying to identify, listening to the issues that they identified as the major problems that we were facing in our state and our communities. And what we quickly realized in that, those listening sessions is that housing work in New Mexico, I'm sure like many other states, is very siloed. There's not a single state entity tasked with overseeing housing policy or enforcing any housing laws or policy. And even the advocates and the nonprofits that work on housing, everyone's just sort of fragmented. And so after talking to advocates and community members, one of the first issues that was brought to our attention was the rampant abuses that are happening in mobile home parks in New Mexico. Many of our residents, because we are such a low income state, many of our residents that are homeowners live in mobile home parks. And so what we learned, and after doing some research, is that our state has strong protections for mobile home residents, but there's no one there to enforce those protections. And because many mobile home residents are lower income, they can't necessarily afford to go find private counsel to affirmatively sue mobile home park owners. And so one of the big things we did sort of out the gate in that first year was file a class action lawsuit against a corporation that owns 6 mobile home parks in New Mexico. And so that case, it started up, it's still going, it's going slowly, but like with so many other places, when COVID hit, we had to drastically change our priorities and shift gears. to tackle the new housing issues that came up in light of COVID. And so, one of the main things we had to do is start, doing Know Your Rights trainings and developing those trainings and giving them to other advocates, talking about the various moratoria, the state and federal moratoria, how they overlapped. We started taking on some individual cases, even though that's not something we typically do, because some individual eviction cases, we wanted to sort of test the state courts, see if the judges were abiding by the moratoria, what they were doing. Spoiler alert, many weren't. So we actually ended up appealing a couple cases. But the big thing that's come out of the pandemic is that a really good coalition of advocates have come together. We met loosely before, but we really coalesced under some of the major issues that were brought about by COVID. And so in the last year, we've been meeting regularly, and we all started looking at housing policy on a broader scale. And sort of long story short, we worked together to bring a piece of legislation during our most recent legislative session in New Mexico, which was ran January to March. And so we brought a bill that sought to do three things. The first was to broaden tenant rights and sort of balance the rights of tenants with the rights of landlords and property owners. So for example, our state has some of the shortest eviction timeframes in the country. So we sought to extend the time for tenants to catch up on rent if they're late, sought to extend the time before a hearing so that tenants have the opportunity to seek counsel, and sought to extend the time post-judgment so that tenants would have more time to move out. The bill also included an amendment to our State Human Rights Act, which would have made a source of income discrimination illegal. So where that typically comes about is where folks are trying to pay with trying to rent with a Section 8 voucher, and they're refused because landlords don't want to rent to folks with a voucher. So the bill would have made that illegal. And then third, the bill sought to create a statewide housing council. And the bill ended up getting a lot of support. The governor was supportive. We had a lot of legislative support. We even got some opposition on board, the Apartment Association of New Mexico. And the bill passed the House, and the first Senate committee, but it got stuck in our state Senate Judiciary Committee, like so many other bills. So ultimately it did not pass. So for the future of our work, we are really looking to build on the momentum that bill sort of gathered and the support, and really push to either get a special session where we can ask our governor to really focus on housing, especially as the various moratoria start phasing out. And if not a special session, we would hope that we could get this on the call next year for the next year's legislative session. So those are sort of our major future initiatives, and then also just uncovering what's happening in the very rural parts of our state. I see Tristia Bauman on this call. I've been talking to her recently about some things that are happening in Roswell, some evictions without due process from a mobile home park. So just looking to uncover those things that are sort of not getting a lot of light shed on them in rural parts of the state.
Okay, thanks so much, Maria. And before I introduce the next speaker, let me just again point out, as Maria was, I think what Maria is bringing up, especially with regard to the mobile home, those who live in mobile homes, we're very mindful of the expansive nature of unstable housing conditions. It's not just the visible homeless on the street, but the more hidden homeless, cars and RVs and weekly rate motels. And so that's a very important part of the work we're doing. And I'm glad to hear that a lot of the focus is on the mobile home situation in New Mexico. So the next, our next speaker, we're moving right along here. I want to bring up Jean-Vive Jones Wright. I met her and I actually met first Andrea St. Julian. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, down in San Diego at the tail end of the Poor People's Campaign a couple of years ago. We had 40 days of nonviolent moral direct action. I met Andrea, and learned about the moral governance, the community organized for moral governance. And then she made me aware of Jean Vivet, and I'm so glad we made those connections. They're doing some outstanding work. She's doing some outstanding work in the San Diego area, and we're so happy to have her with us tonight. So Jean Vivet, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prince. And I know he's going to say, I told you to call me Anthony, but it is really good to be here on this call with everyone. I think that it is extremely important for us all to do these types of things and engage in these discussions and to collaborate and see what's happening all over the place and how we can join forces. So my name is Genevieve Jones-Wright, and I am a co-founder along with Andrea St. Julian and the executive director of MOGO, and that is our shorthand name for Community Advocates for Just and Moral Governance. We are an impact litigation nonprofit that is established and located in San Diego. We do work all throughout San Diego County. On March 17th of this year, I stood with other community members in front of our City College community campus where a suspected DUI driver plowed into an encampment, striking 9 people, killing 3. All were unsheltered community members. That day, just as today, I am just utterly frustrated, and that's a complete understatement. It's just maddening what's happening in San Diego. As a native San Diegan and as a former public defender of San Diego County for 13 years, I can tell you that this is not a new phenomenon. San Diego, just like many other cities, does not treat our unhoused neighbors with dignity and respect. 1 month before that tragedy in San Diego County, 2 unsheltered men were killed as they were outside by a 13-year-old who has stolen her mother's car. And you all may recall the Hep A outbreak that we had in San Diego that claimed many lives between 2016 and 2018 that really affected our unsheltered community members. All of these deaths were 1000% preventable. And so it's insensate. I get so upset and angry when I hear politicians particularly talk about how these deaths were somehow unavoidable. Housing is a human right, and we would rather do anything else but to respect the dignity of unsheltered community members and to provide housing and recognize it as a human right. So my organization, MOGO, along with Disability Rights California, filed a lawsuit last year, Price versus City and County of San Diego. Before MOGO jumped into the lawsuit, we wrote a demand letter, and we demanded that the mayor and our police department stop criminalizing homelessness. We want them to stop impounding vehicles and RVs where people were sleeping and stop displacing unhoused people. 1 year later, with a supermajority of Democrats on the city council, a Democratic mayor that was just put in November, we're still seeing that these same things are happening. And so we're continuing to battle with them. 1 year ago, we demanded that the city of San Diego stop pushing people into an inherently dangerous 1,500 person mega shelter and to start connecting them with a 2,000 hotel and motel rooms that were procured in our region in response to COVID-19. So the city and the county of San Diego both knew that the majority of the unsheltered populations live in the city of San Diego, and yet they neglected to do what they were supposed to do with that funds in a responsible way. And so a year ago, even though the city and the county of San Diego knew how dangerous congregate settings were, they continued to usher our unsheltered community members into this congregate setting. This is completely, obviously, outside of public health directives, and They were giving them no other options, even though we had provided the city with medical information, guidelines, reports. We even showed them their own public health directives that warned people not to congregate with non-household members in an indoor setting. We were able to see firsthand how unsheltered community members were treated drastically different than housed community members because we had wildfires last year. And when the people who were displaced from their homes due to the wildfires had to go somewhere, you know where they put them? They put them in hotel rooms. They put them in non-congregate settings. And so there was a double standard, again, going back to the lack of respect and dignity for unhoused community members. So we felt that we had no choice but to file a lawsuit and to seek court intervention to compel the city and the county to act the way that they should. Our plaintiffs are 5 unhoused city residents and an entity that serves unhoused individuals. These are people who were told repeatedly that the convention center, which was the mega congregate shelter, was their only option, even though we had sitting procured hotel rooms that were empty, and our plaintiffs were categorically eligible to go to these hotel rooms. The hotel rooms were FEMA reimbursable, and yet they would rather let the hotel rooms sit empty than to put residents of our city and our county into these hotel rooms where they could be safe. I do want to end with this as well. We have police accountability as a very big priority because we have to limit law enforcement community interactions. Last month, an unhoused gentleman was shot by a police officer in San Diego as he ate food. And we all watched it. It was a 6-minute video and it was horrifying. And thankfully, he survived. But 2 days ago, a man who was believed to be a member of our unhoused community was also shot, but this time killed by an Escondido police officer after a call was made to 911 saying that he was hitting cars with metal poles. We've heard it here at the top of this call that property rights do not trump human rights. And we need to drive that point home and make it a guiding philosophy. And so I'm in this fight with you all. And I just want to say thank you so much for convening this. I hope this is not the last, but I really want us to put our heads together, put our knowledge, our expertise, our lived experience, our personal, professional experience, and let's really get to the root causes, which we all know what it is, and let's eradicate this mess that we have in all of our cities. But thank you all so very much.
Well, thank you so
Anthony?
much. I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. I just want to say one thing real quick. We have one clarification question, and we do really appreciate all the questions that are coming in the chat. They are wonderful, and we have a question and answer period at the end where those will be given to all the panelists. But we just had one clarifying question about repeating the case name for Price versus County of San Diego. Is that the correct name?
Yes, Price versus City and County of San Diego.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anthony.
Okay, thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Jean-Vivier. We want to bring up next, apparently, one of our scheduled speakers, Andy McNulty, who represents Denver Homeless Out Loud. And I've been very fortunate to have met some of the leadership of Denver Homeless Out Loud. They've been fighting for years on behalf of the poor and homeless in that city. And unfortunately, Andy is tied up with a deposition, and he may be able to join us a little bit later. So I'm going to move the program around a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and call on our next speaker. Was going to be on the second panel, but I'm going to move him up right now to give him a field promotion, so to speak. And that's a young guy. I believe he's the president of the newest local in the National Union of the Homeless. It was formed just in the last couple of months. And it was formed within the context of a battle to stop an encampment where most of the people in the encampment were formerly what they call anchor outs, people living in Richardson Bay off the coast of San Francisco, near San Francisco. And we learned about a whole segment of the population that is in a dire circumstance, are homeless in one sense and not homeless in another. So I want to introduce our newest, the president of our newest local, and Robbie Powelson. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit what's going on and how we can kind of move that struggle into a broader struggle for real systemic change.
Yeah, thank you for that, Anthony. Yeah, so for those who don't know, right, Richardson Bay is home to, you know, over 100 people who live anchored out on boats right out there in a federally designated anchorage. And right now we're seeing a tremendous escalation in police violence as the state agency called the Bay Conservation Development Commission implements their own extremely problematic prerogative to evict everybody from the anchorage. So, and it's a very violent process because every single time they take a boat, they don't get preserved. They crush them with backhoes, chainsaws. Just 2 weeks ago, we had one of our mariners had their boat crushed, and then things escalated with the police after they destroyed his home, and ultimately escalated to a SWAT teams coming on the anchorage, burning his dog alive, lighting his boat on fire. Incredible escalation, and he didn't even have a gun. Right now, we're in desperate straits out here, and the problem that we're facing, and why I like what Genevieve said about let's do more of these, because our perils coming from a state agency that doesn't know or see the trauma that they're inflicting on the mariner community. Right now, the camp at Dunphy Park is full of people who've lost their boats to Harbor Master Hovel, you know, been thrown out onto the streets with nothing, literally nothing, not even allowed to get their possessions out of their homes. You got a harbor master who ran over one community member and won't even release the footage of him running over. We're suing him for it. I mean, it's really, we have Coast Guard, U.S. military intervening. We have the Army Corps of Engineers. So we have all these incredibly both federal powers and state agencies, and then all acting through a local joint powers authority, these nebulous bureaucracies that are coming in and trying to eradicate a community that's been there for decades. And literally, you know, you can, if you drive by Dunphy Park, you see the tents. You know, that's just this incredibly cruel program that's being instigated. And it's all instigated by really bureaucrats who don't live in the communities, don't see the trauma they're inflicting. And I think my call to action today is that, you know, getting more of these meetings together where we talk about those state and federal agencies that are inflicting harms in our communities, agencies like Caltrans, massive, you know, that's another big one of our campsites in Marin County is the underpass. I mean, that's Caltrans. Again, we have these state agencies that are over our heads, and they can kind of do whatever they want because there's not really any accountability, because they're based out in, you know, their district offices are in Sacramento, and we need to be looking at that, and especially for all of you in the coastal communities, you know, understand that mariners, people that live in boats, are a huge component of people who are unstably housed. That in every marina you go to, because of California laws right now, 10% live aboard slips are available in marinas. So you're only allowed to have 10% of your slips have people living on them. But then you have lots of people who will get a boat and live on the cheap, where you can only be on the boat 2 days a week. So the other days of the week, they might be out camping, they might be in their car or van, they might be staying at a friend's house, but they're still connected with the boat. And all because of these, again, state laws, state agencies that are creating undue duress on these communities. And it's something that people should be very aware of. And I just thank you, and I thank everybody for coming today. I'm really hopeful that we can get more of this going, especially for Bay Conservation Development Commission, all my Bay Area people. We need to be following up, because Larry Gold's band, they just evicted a whole campsite in Oakland as well. So this is something we need to work together on. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Robbie, and thank you in particular for opening up a whole new avenue for expansion of the homeless movement, the homeless union movement, and being our newest officer in the union. So we're gonna have a special greeting in a moment from Jeannie Meyer, but before we do that, I want to bring up our next panelist. We just heard from one of our newest officers in the homeless union, and now we're going to hear from a brother who's been arguably, I won't say the oldest, but the longest serving officer in the homeless union, certainly one of them. And he's one of our senior advisors. We cherish and we rely heavily on the experience of the original National Union of the Homeless, which I and Joe Peary and Sabina Martin and Kristen were all part of. But amongst those equals, the first amongst those equals in terms of the architecture of the original union. He's also a board member of Picture the Homeless in New York City. And it's my honor to bring up Willie Baptist. Willie?
Okay, happy to be here. And thanks for the comments and sharing stories that has just preceded me. I've been given 5 minutes, which people know at my age and with all the time I've put in. I've been organizing in poor communities for over 50 years now. And to give me 5 minutes is a minor miracle, but I'm gonna attempt, and I hope everybody can pray for me as I attempt this miracle of constraining my statements to 5 minutes. The answer that our mission and the mission of the new National Union of the Homeless essentially says, as an answer to all the problems that we're dealing with, there's three things that need to be done. And I want people to take notes of this. You should get your pen and your pencil to take notes of 3 things that need to be done in order to solve the problems of poverty and homelessness. 1, organization. 2, organization. 3, organization. You can't do shit by yourself. We can only do it together. People hear me? That is one of the real lessons I've learned through my 55 years of organizing in the impoverished and poor community. And we're going to keep in this situation, especially under the conditions today with the coronavirus and layered with the unemployment crises, the eviction crises, and so forth. Homelessness is growing by leaps and bounds. And the only way we're going to turn that situation around is that we turn it around. But the only way we can turn it around is that we organize. Like I was saying, I've been organizing over about 55 years. I was an organizer and educator, as with Sabina Martin, Anthony, and Kristen, and also Tani. Others too. I think we got old Peter here, don't we? Oh, Peter Konoy. That we were in the original organizing of the homeless union during the late 80s and early 90s, where we organized over 35, well, I should say between 25 to 35 members that we organized. We organized in 25 states, 25 locals. We had at the founding convention, for example, of the Chicago, Illinois, and Gary, Indiana Homeless Union, which Tony was part of that union. We had at the founding convention where we organized in every nook and cranny where homeless folks were found, men and women. Some 900 delegates assembled to form the Chicago Homeless Union. In LA, we had over 1,000 delegates that was organized over a 2 months organizing drive that culminated in a founding convention. And in New York City, we had over 1,200 delegates that attended that founding convention in New York City at the famous Riverside Church, where the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King gave his famous Beyond Vietnam speech. This is homeless men and women organizing homeless men and women. And the main lesson that we draw from those experiences is that we can think for ourselves. Homeless and poor folk can think for themselves. They can speak for themselves, They can fight for themselves. They can organize themselves and lead not only themselves, but the entire country, especially at this time when this country is suffering from more and more homelessness and more poverty. There is huge reservoir in the streets, despite all the stereotypes that are put out there. There's a huge reservoir of geniuses, of unsung saints among the population of the poor and homeless. And indeed, they can think for themselves, they can speak for themselves, we can fight for ourselves, we can organize, and we can lead. People got to hear that. That's one of the main lessons that we learned. That we are homeless, but we're not helpless. And that when we talk about work around the homeless and housing question, we're talking about working with the homeless and not for them. They have to deliver themselves. Nobody deliver anything for them. That is the key, one of the first lessons that I want to emphasize. The second lesson is that our fight is not just about our plight and the fight that we wage, but it's about the insight of our fight and organizing and carrying out the organizing drives that we carried out militantly, taking over houses, going to jail, civil disobedience. We was able to really uncover the class realities that exist beneath all the major ills in this society of racism, of sexism, every ill, or militarism, all the ills that we are confronting with today, all the major ills that everybody's confronting, not just the poor and homeless, but everybody, increasingly other sections of the population are being confronted with. And that the insight that our struggle has brought to the reality of this struggle as to what the real root of it, and not just the branch and the leaf of it, but the real root of the cause, is a system that produces, that relies on the production of poverty and homelessness in order for it to concentrate wealth among a few who have a winter house, a summer house, an autumn house, a house in Peary, while a million of us don't have a house at all. People hear what I'm saying? This lesson of the, not just the plight, but in fight, but the insight was a very important lesson. The last major lesson I want to point to here is that that our struggle around homelessness is part of a class struggle. That those who are not homeless or poor today are just one paycheck or healthcare crisis away from poverty. I don't care if you're a lawyer or so-called privilege or whatever all everybody want to talk about, but we got people in our ranks who are former steel workers who've gone to college. We have all that in the ranks of the homeless union today. Nobody, is shielded against this system that produces poverty for the many and concentrate wealth to a tiny few. This is the type of structure that we're dealing with, and our mission is about ending that structure, and that class character of our struggle was expressed in our slogan, "You're only one paycheck away from the homeless." In fact, when we went to union members to union meetings to recruit brothers and sisters from the union, we extended that slogan by saying, your members of your union are becoming members of our union. And that's a fact, and that's still the fact today. And so I want to put that out. This problem of homelessness is poor is not about those people over there and somehow I'm privileged and I'm cool. No, you're not cool. It's about the direction of this country. It's not about just helping this homeless, helping this poor person. It's about moving this country and making it a better country, and a country that has the wherewithal to produce a prefab house in 45 minutes. It has empty houses that are sitting there. There's no reason why we should have poverty. There's no reason that we should have homelessness. The other thing that I want to speak to is that at the height of the organizing, we were essentially a mass, illegal, civil disobedient housing takeover movement. We had several synchronized housing takeovers. Peter Kanoy, who was part of the Skylight picture, they captured that in this famous, in a very, I think people should see this video documentary called Takeover that covered our union along with the National Welfare Rights Union and other groupings in which we organized housing takeover. We had several synchronized housing takeover. One of the years we had over 73 cities that synchronized their takeover, homeless in different cities and others who joined in our struggle on the same day to carry out these housing takeovers. But Takeover, the movie, the documentary, it covers that point. And I wanted to state that because every struggle that we have, and even today with the encampments, we're confronting with the US state apparatus that includes the police, include the intelligence services, FBI, all of these forces that we are arrayed against, and also the court system. And so the importance of revolutionary lawyering, given that nature of our struggle, is very important. And the experience that we're accumulating, where the lawyers are not just in there to help the poor or help the homeless, but actually using those case courses to get the issues out there and to help organize a movement, which is the only way we can solve this problem. I think revolutionary lawyering is absolutely critical. And I think all of our experience shows that in the past, and it shows it today. And I guess we're going to talk more about it. I'm winding up, Tony. Tony, I'm winding up. I have to tell you that.
You couldn't pull off your miracle, Willie.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say this. The first, during the National Union, of the Homeless organized drive in New York, we held the first. I mean, I'm living in Manhattan, man, and they got all these goddamn sirens going on with. There's too many people in New York and Manhattan. Too much going on. At any rate, we organized the first tribunal. It was a human rights tribunal where we exposed the unjustness of our court system, our justice system. That if this country's founding creed, which is we hold these truth to be self-evident, we all are endowed by our creators with certain God-given rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How can you have the right to life if you don't have a home, if you don't have, basic food, substance, your basic necessities? This tribunal exposed that, and we had lawyers that helped put that together, and we were able to use that tribunal to further organize. And since then, we've had a number of truth commissions where we've exposed this particular element of our founding creed, that is that housing should be a right, and that your basic necessities, food, clothing, these should be non-negotiable, especially in a society that has the kind of productive capabilities that it has. There's no reason. We're not living in a land of scarcity. We're living in a land of plenty, and there's no reason why people should have no house while few people have all kinds of houses and so on. We think that we organize the homeless today, and we are on our way in organizing today. We can ignite a powerful movement, just like the Underground Railroad of the slaves ignited the whole period of turmoil and change and fundamental change in the society during the Civil War and Reconstruction. That we're talking about real changes in this country, and that we could start organizing not from the top down and not from the middle up, but from the bottom up. That is from the very bottom, starting with the homeless population. That if we can organize, we can begin to change this country and make it better. And revolutionary lawyering is absolutely indispensable to this process. Thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry to be so long-winded, but you get an old person like me on the phone, give me a mic. Don't give me a mic. I don't drop the mic. I hold on to it and take it and eat it, go to sleep with it. All right, thank you guys for listening.
Well, thank you, Willie. Thank you, Willie. You couldn't pull off the miracle, but I think we'll all are all off better off for it. You can see why Willie, Savina, and some of the more veterans in our movement going back 30, 35 years are so essential to what we're doing today. We stand on their shoulders, but they're not passive. They're still actively in the leadership of this union. So thank you so much for those remarks.
You're damn right we are. We're still active.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Me and Willie go back along. I was 14 when I met Willie, and still hasn't pulled off a miracle, but he's still an important key leader in our union movement. So with that, I want to call on we have 3 more panelists that we're going to bring up to wrap up the panel. But before I do that, I want to give just a couple minutes to a very important leader on the in the global struggle for human rights. The International Association of Democratic Lawyers was founded in 1946 in the aftermath of the defeat of fascism. My father was in the 10th Mountain Division and was part of that fight against fascism in World War II. And the International Association of Democratic Lawyers was formed to guarantee that the world would be protected from these kind of fascist measures, and to see to it, many of them were Nuremberg prosecutors. And today they are probably the premier international legal organization that is fighting for human rights and to establish entitlements to those necessities that Willie Baptist just talked about. So she was recently elected president. She follows in the footsteps of Nelson Mandela, who at one time was president of the IALD. I want to bring to you for a couple of comments, Sister Jeannie Myrer. Jeannie?
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. Nelson Mandela was a president emeritus of IADL. I met him in 1996 at our Congress, and we were part of the anti-apartheid struggle. And I want to reach out to Brother Baptiste, because I remember you, Anthony, and Brother Baptiste came to my office a number of years ago, in which we talked about the need to organize, and also hold up the right to housing and the right to a decent home as a fundamental human right. I think you may not know this, but the Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights does call for the right to everyone to have an adequate standard of living, and included in that is the right to housing and a decent home. The United States, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is universal, and means that all countries abide by it. The treaty that came after it, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, also contains the human right to housing. And it is, and in fact, that is not a treaty that the United States has ratified, because we don't recognize economic rights, but we have ratified a covenant called the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which prevents discrimination. And one of the bases of discrimination that is illegal under that is based on property, economic rights, based on your level of property. And lawyers in this country really don't know, because the way in which the human rights law has sort of been buried and taught as, oh, this is soft law, it can't be used. And we're here to say, no, that's not true. We have the duty to bring forward, as radical lawyers, what does it mean to say that something is a basic human right? We've also ratified the Convention against the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, which recognizes also no discrimination in housing, and the Convention Against Torture, which also includes other cruel and inhuman and degrading treatment, includes criminalization of the homeless. So there are all of the international laws that are out there, which most people don't know about because they're not taught in the law schools. And I learned about them because I became active in the International Association of Democratic Lawyers. It's important for us to know these things and to use those tools, even as in advocacy, if not in thinking about using them in court, and certainly in the organizing. Now, IADL is an organization around the world. And in the United States, the Lawyers Guild, the National Conference of Black Lawyers, and the Center for Constitutional Rights are affiliates. And we are hoping that, and throughout the world, we have organizations that have been fighting for the right to uphold all of these economic rights. But I can tell you that within the neoliberal context, there's a big push to get people to not even know that these rights exist. And so I'm so glad that the housing committee, the Committee on Housing and Homelessness within the Lawyers Guild is taking up the struggle. And I will pledge to work with you in any way I possibly can to support the work of this committee, and to do whatever I can and what IADL can to support the organizing, because I agree 100% with Willie, organizing. Thank you.
Okay, Jeannie. Jeannie, thanks so much for that. And we're definitely going to take you up on that offer of working collaboratively. I think the point you made about people have rights, but they don't know they have these rights. People generally don't fight for rights that they don't know that they have. And so I think of popularizing the fact and the demonstrable fact that these economic rights to housing and against the torture of being homeless and mistreated in the way that we just heard described, especially in San Diego, was prime example of shooting homeless people, and in Sausalito destroying the meager little boats that belong to homeless people are prohibited by these rights. So I think that the union and other frontline fighters are in a position to let people know about these rights. And that's an aspect of the collaboration we really need to establish. That's very much a part of revolutionary lawyering. So thank you so much, Jeannie. And we look forward to hearing more from you. So let me go ahead and bring up next a guy I've known for a long time also, who along with me was one of the original organizers of the Chicago-Gary area Union of the Homeless back in the day. Joe Peary has spent most of his life in the Cabrini Green projects. He is recognized across the country as the leading spokesperson for all the struggles that broke out in Cabrini Green. And then as we moved to form the Homeless Union in Chicago and Northwest Indiana, Joe was right there on the front lines, along with a few others in establishing the original union. And now Joe is playing a leading role in the reestablished Chicago Homeless Union, which just had their founding convention about 2 months ago. So Joe Peary, why don't you share some of your experience and address the issue of how do we move from these day-to-day fights to the kind of systemic change that we all know has to come? Joe Peary.
Okay, can you hear me okay, everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. All right. Yeah, I want to use a contrast between the old Homeless Union and the new Chicago Union of the Homeless that we just built, or we're actually in the process of building, and kind of use that as an analogy of, addressing this, this question of how do we move forward. First, let me say that what we had in the beginning, here in Chicago, we hit the scene, I think, so fast and so strong that we immediately got, community support. I mean, it was like right away. And we also had something going for ourselves here that most people would never be able to have. We had Harold Washington as mayor of Chicago. And literally just, kind of give you an idea. If we went down to City Hall, the homeless unit, we'd literally get on the bus, go down to City Hall, and go up on the 5th floor where the mayor's office was. And we tell the secretary, we're the homeless union, we're here to see Harold Washington. 5 minutes later, we were meeting Harold Washington. He loved the homeless. He would order pizza, and, we'd be sitting in there talking about what we're going to do next, And it was with his, leadership in the city that, for that, a lot of folks called him the socialist mayor. But it was because of his leadership that, we had a city that was literally emptying out all the projects. You had something like 6,000 or 7,000 empty apartments and public housing here at the time. They were talking about closing down anything that was for poor folks. They were closing it down, getting rid of it. And Harold Washington just literally put a stop to all of that. So we had something I don't think anybody else had. Could you imagine if the mayor of New York City or the mayor of San Francisco or San Diego was on your side to the extent that literally anything you were doing, they were in support of and behind the scenes helping to make happen. So, and literally when Harold died, that was one of the aspects of the coalition we had pulled together, and a huge part of it that kind of fell apart. I know there were other groups. We had a coalition of groups And when this coalition sort of fell apart, we really just didn't have the ability to sustain ourselves, continue to sustain ourselves in the organization. And I would say this a bit, to me, the biggest part of it was the National Union of the Homeless sort of fell apart as well. Or at least was weakened to the extent that, our contact with them was really broken off. So you put all that together, and I'm saying that we just didn't have the ability to sustain the struggle. And part of what I want to say too is what I think is just so important here is that, you had deindustrialization really starting out then. And now it's pretty much complete. And back then where we used to say there were 50,000 homeless people in the city of Chicago, city and here in the Gary area. I mean, literally now we were as high as something like 137,000, I think it was, homeless folks here in Chicago. Now it's down to like 70, they're saying it's 78,000. Still, that's huge. That's humongous. There were no 10 cities back then. There are 10 cities all over the city now. And let me just say this. We were able to, you look back and you look at what you win. So let me just kind of tell you guys what we won. Literally, you had the national government, the federal government, who had intended to close down public housing. We stopped that. We made them open up the public housing, 6,000 or 7,000 empty vacant apartments in public housing. They had to move homeless people into those apartments. We had something called SROs built here. That was something that Harold Washington put together. That single room occupancies, they were built. We had, as I said earlier, we had complete support of the public. I mean, anytime we went on the news, anytime we went on talk shows, it just went wild. People were calling in like crazy, wild support. And last, we won the right to vote, here in Chicago, because prior to us getting involved, if you were homeless, you simply didn't have the right to vote. And we sued and we were able to win that. And in spite of all those things that we weren't, like I said, the union came, just came a day where we couldn't sustain ourselves and continue. So let's talk about now. So I think some of the things we got now, and one of them is what we're doing right now. We're literally talking on a Zoom, right? There was no Zoom back in those days. We have technology now where if there would have been a pandemic back in those days to the extent we got now, it would have really put an end to a lot of what we would have been able to do. Whereas now, it doesn't, because you got the technology. People have cell phones now. There's just better communication. And, you can, it's a whole, probably a couple of hours you could spend talking about just that, what the impact that technology has had on the movement. Okay. And so, like Tony had just said a few minutes ago, we've only been around a few months. Actually, it was October, like the end of October, when we had our founding convention. So I guess that's about 5 months that we've been in existence, right? And during that time, we've had a petition campaign along the lines of the previous speaker just brought up around the universal right to housing. And it's going to continue until summer. And we're going to present them to the city mayor, to the county president, and to the governor here when we're done. So we got that campaign going on. We've been doing housing takeovers. We went down to the Chicago Housing Authority, put them on notice that we're going after them. We literally went down to the headquarters, had a great big, took caskets down there, had everybody get up and speak. And, the part of it too, government has they're implicit in what's going on here. And so we want to bring pressure on government. So Chicago Housing Authority, that's one. And the other one is the city. Now, one thing that we get here that a lot of folks may not get is we get what's called an Arctic blast every winter. And during the Arctic blast, it can get down to like 20 below zero. That means if you're outside, it's basically a death sentence. And the mayor had made, currently Lori Lightfoot is our mayor, she had made promises that she was going to house the homeless, get them off the street because of the pandemic, put them in hotels. She didn't do it. So what we felt we had to do, which we did do, is we went out, raised money, and we literally ourselves went around and got people with cars, supporters with cars, went around and got people up off of in these 10 cities off the street and put them up in hotels and paid for it. And one of the nasty things that happened, one of the aldermen here, that would be the equivalent of a city council member in another city. But one of the aldermen here, as soon as the people got out of the 10th city in her area, she put bulldozers down there and bulldozed everybody's stuff. So people literally lost, stuff like their birth certificates. They lost money. I mean, they lost personal belongings, pictures, family albums, this sort of thing. Just, things that are important to you. They're gone, and they're gone forever. So these are one of the things that had happened. And so we say that what we were able to do is we were able to save some lives. And by the way, the count, I lost count maybe about 3 weeks ago, but we had got up to about 15 dead folks that had died this winter so far. In fact, we had one guy that was run over by a car, literally hit and run right in front of the police station, because the 10th city is about a half a block from the police station. Hit and run by a car, nobody, there's no cameras around. Now, mind you, when something else goes on, they really have all the ability to track down who did what. They didn't really care. That was the situation. So literally, when you're talking about homelessness in Chicago, and this is what I sort of meant earlier when I was talking about the situation has changed, you're talking about a life and death struggle. This is life and death here. Let me give you an example. There was a particular day in June, some years back. I don't remember exactly what year. It might have been 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. Or literally in Chicago, in the suburbs, they buried hundreds, and I'm not lying about this, hundreds of homeless people on the same day were buried in Homewood Cemetery. Homewood is a suburb of Chicago. 8 caskets went into the ground, and what they didn't know the names of the people. So on the casket was written, known only to God. And what hit us was that at the time was that they didn't care to find out. I mean, these are dead folks that went into the ground, and their life meant absolutely nothing, right? And so look at now, I think we have a really good example of how the system has kind of moved. I mean, you have a pandemic, you have these police killings, where literally how can they tell you, how many ways can they tell you human life don't mean a damn to these people? It really doesn't. If they're willing to allow regular citizens to die to the tune of 600,000 and 700,000 people from this pandemic because they just want to deny it's there or just don't want to do what they're supposed to do. I mean, they don't, that many citizens die, or just that night after night, you see police just murdering folks, shooting them down in the street. How many ways can they tell you that human life don't mean nothing to these people? So if human life don't mean nothing to the regular citizen, you imagine what that means for the homeless who are directly at the bottom. And I want to follow up to what Willie brought up when he gave his comments about organization, and I want to add to that leadership. Leadership is key as part of that. Literally, we have 78,000, as I said, homeless folks in the city of Chicago. And we realize that if we're going to find the homeless folks that possess the leadership qualities, we're going to have to go out and touch all them 78,000 folks. We're going to have to get out here in the streets and find these folks. And they're going to come to us because that's what's been going on. We've been out there organizing, and little by little, folks are coming to us. And, it becomes very apparent who has leadership capabilities. They step forward right away. And so we've been developing that. And I mentioned earlier about Zoom, and it's something that was not possible in the past that we're able to do today. So we have our meetings. We have executive board meetings. We have our officers and all that. And we have trainings. We train ourselves in organizing, and we use the Zoom to do that. And literally all you need is a cell phone in order to participate. And we've been having a lot of success with that, right? And so we kind of asked the question, how do we then go out and be able to accomplish what I just brought up, leadership? How do you find the leadership out there among the homeless? How do you get out here and touch 78,000 people? And what we've decided to do is that we mapped out all the encampments in the city, all the shelters in the city, places where, like for instance, there's students who are homeless, this sort of thing. There's these flea bag hotels, transient hotels. We are identifying them. There's people who sleep in their cars. There's people, just individuals raw out there on the street. So we're identifying these folks, and we're talking about coming up with a representative council that represents each each one of these, areas or groupings of folks that can be represented. And on that basis, that we're able to get out there and touch the homeless folks, right? Touch the folks as a whole. I would say, it's one thing for us to talk about. We've had our meetings, and we talked about what we want to do, what the right thing is to do. And a lot of the things that you brought up, for instance, we'll discuss those things. It's a whole nother thing when it comes time to putting that stuff into practice. That's right. Super hard. And so this is what we're struggling with and going forward with. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Okay, Joe. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Was that 6 minutes?
Yeah, it was 6 minutes with to the second power, I think, but that's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
That's okay.
So it's more than 5 minutes, man.
Willie couldn't pull off the miracle, and neither could you, Joe. But that's okay. We all have a lot to say, and we want to move to that portion of the evening where we're going to open it up. We were talking about having breakout sessions, but I think what we're going to do, if it's okay with everybody, is just stay on and start having this open dialogue, take questions and answers, let the panelists talk a little bit more. But before we do that, we have two more speakers, two more panelists, which we're very, very happy and proud to bring on. And I first want to introduce a young lady who serves as the policy director for the Cairo Center in New York. And she's also a part of the policy making team for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Works very closely with Reverend Barber, Reverend Liz, on issues of policy, including the questions of housing and homelessness. Shali Gupta Barnes is an attorney. She means business. I mean, this is someone who, when she speaks, she is backed up by the facts, by the development of policy, and at the same time, she has a very broad vision and a great fighting spirit. So Shali, if you could pull off the miracle and try to keep it to 5 minutes, and then our next speaker after that, and then we will open it up. Shali?
I will do my best. Thank you, everybody, just for the powerful organizing and experiences and insights that are being offered here tonight. This is, as everyone knows on this call, a crisis that most people in this country have not fully grasped of what we're facing, with tens of millions of people really on the edge of losing their homes and very little support coming in our way. So as Anthony said, I'm the policy director of the Cairo Center and of the Poor People's Campaign, and we are organized across 45 states with an infrastructure and a network that connects those states. We have coordinating committees, we have members, we have a network of over 200, policy groups, churches, unions, and more. But everything we do is defined by the needs and demands of poor and dispossessed people in this country. And when we talk about poor and dispossessed people, we're talking about the 140 million people who every day is a struggle. 140 million, that's more than 40% of the country. And we all know that people who are homeless and houseless are the leading edge of that 140 million. And so as we organize around these needs and demands, we also recognize that, among the people we work with, among the leaders of this campaign in these states and organizations we're connected to are, of course, people who are homeless, many people who are on this call, or on the verge of being homelessness. This leadership reflects these broad conditions that are unfolding, and it influences the demands that we're making and the policies that we're fighting for, including, in terms of housing. What we are calling for, what we've been calling for, is not only the expansion of affordable housing, but ending all evictions, including of people from there, who are living in encampments, people have been living in their cars, especially during this pandemic. But we want to ensure that we're not addressing the crisis, the housing crisis, by expanding a shelter system, right? But instead by making it possible for everyone to have a decent home, and recognizing that these conditions are facing not just a small number of people, but millions and millions of people. And that's some of the narrative change that we're pushing forward, that this is not a marginal issue. This is a central issue, that, some 2/3 of Americans will face poverty, live poor in their lives before the time that, before they reach, at some point in their lives, before they're elderly. And what this means is that our theory of change, our core theory of change, is that when we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Not when we wait for wealth or political power to trickle down from the top. No, when we lift from the bottom, that's what we're talking about. And that means changing our whole orientation around housing, around homelessness, around poverty, around poor people, not, from a position of, from thinking this is charity or philanthropy, to one of deep solidarity, of actual survival, to see that the existence of homelessness, as we've seen in this pandemic, if anybody is without a home, that none of us are able to shelter in place or remain socially distanced, to see that unless we all have health care, our public well-being is not cared for, to see that job security and living wages and incomes are not the right thing to do, are not only the right thing to do, they're also good for our entire economy, our economic well-being as a nation. And in fact, every dollar that goes into a poor person's pocket gets turned into $1.20. It gets multiplied into more than that single dollar when it gets spent, versus every dollar that goes into a business gets turned into 30 cents. So which one should we be investing in? Should we be investing in the wealthy or investing in poor and dispossessed people? The answer is clear. The math is right in front of us. And so this paradigm shift, to not turn to the wealthy and powerful for answers, but to the poor, this is what we are trying to build and organize in this campaign across 45 states. And so, and this means addressing all of the human rights that everyone has. So they are not privileges, so they are rights that are held and accessible and respected and protected for us all. And so we're connecting people in every part of the country, and knowing that, really connecting the issue of housing to this broader set of basic human rights, knowing that, if we lack in housing, we may be lacking likely in other basic needs. And if we're lacking in housing as a nation, we're probably spending too much on policing or war or other things that we don't actually need. So we're bringing all of this together in a policy framework and a human rights framework that's grounded in these fundamental rights, not just of us all, and basically at the very center of it, saying that we have a human right to not be poor in a time of plenty. We have a human right to housing at this time and at all times. And so this is a long haul. We know that, to change this narrative, to build the kind of power that we need to make this real. But personally, I'm encouraged by hearing everybody on this call tonight, the incredible work that's happening all across the country. And I know that with groups like this and many more that we need to connect up with, that we need to bring into this movement that's building in these encampments and in cities and rural towns, and and in every corner of this country where people are in need. We know that we will keep building this until there is no need. And as we say in the campaign, we're moving always forward together and not one step back.
Okay, Shelley, thanks so much for that. And as you may or may not know, the National Union of the Homeless is a partner organization with the Poor People's Campaign National Call for Moral Revival. And we can't thank the Poor People's Campaign enough for the direct supportive work we receive from them in terms of actually on the ground building of the union and of shining a light and helping to change the narrative in this country. So our last panelist is someone I've known for a while. He was one of the original founders of the Mobile, Alabama. Hopefully we still have Jalisa on the call, so we're going to bring up another Alabama. And he's not only a founder of the original Mobile, Alabama Homeless Union, but he's a Reverend Tani Allgood, and just like I did when we were both, in our middle years, went back to law school and got himself a JD. So I think it's appropriate to have a guy who wears a lot of hats, even though he's not wearing one right now. And so, Tani, why don't you wrap up our panelists tonight? And then as soon as you're done, we're going to open it up. We'll have about half an hour left. And I think that's a good amount of time to really open things up for all the participants. So Reverend Allgood, go ahead. You're on mute, Tani. Tani.
There you go.
There you go.
Thank you so much, Tony. My brother Willie tried to put his off on being old, talking so slow. Well, I'm just 2 years behind Willie, but my real handicap is that I'm originally from Mississippi. And like I told a group in Detroit at a United Auto Caucus in 1972, when they gave me 5 minutes to talk, I said, it takes us that long down here just to say hello. So I've got my timer going. So when it goes off, I'm cutting off at the end of the sentence, okay?
Go ahead.
One of the difficulties of organizing the poor and the here in the South has been the whole issue of the race card. It starts from Jim Crow laws that made it illegal for poor whites and blacks to associate together or to meet together. They gave the poor whites a few crumbs, telling them that they were better than the blacks because they were white. And then also there was a thing of terror, because if you cross that line, you face the wrath of the Klan. Now, one thing I have found in 50 years of organizing here in Mississippi and Alabama, I'm in Mobile, Alabama now, is that poverty, survival, homelessness can be a great equalizer. And we found this out when we were organizing started in '93, the Mobile Union Chapter for the Homeless, falling behind Willie and Tony and Liz and the rest of them in organizing the homeless. But really, I didn't organize them. They came to me where I was working, directing the volunteer lawyer program, and we talked about the need for them to get organized. And then they went out and organized and brought the people in. Now, we did some things right. Some of our tactics were good. I think where we were missing was not understanding the strategy, maybe at the time. When we started organizing, there was no place for the homeless to go and get off the streets during the day, no place to take showers, to wash clothes, no health care, no place where they could go and eat during the day. And we had a mayor at that time that was very sympathetic to the homeless because his brother had been homeless due to addiction. And what he did, he started pushing the city council to get these services open for the homeless, and even opening up some housing. But then from that grew this whole homeless industrial complex, if you please. Fast forward to 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit and destroyed the only shelter here for homeless women. That was in September of 2005. The mayor, who was also sympathetic to the homeless to a degree, formed a task force to get another place for for the women to stay. We went to them in April of '06 and offered the mission. You know, I'm not a big fan of shelters. They still hadn't found a place in November of '06, and we went and said, this is unconscionable. We can use the mission temporarily, you know, transitional housing. And we opened in March of 2012. No, excuse me, March of 2007. It wasn't soon enough for one woman because she was released from the hospital that cold February and was found frozen behind a business downtown. Now that didn't happen after we opened the shelter, but I was determined that the shelter was not going to be run like a jail with guards and inmates. You know, it was going to be run like a ministry, and that the staff's number one purpose for being there was to love the women that came in, and the women's job was to love each other. We had white women, though, that did not want to come into the shelter because it was integrated. I'll give you one example. There was one woman, she'd been a former bounty hunter. She'd been sexually and physically abused all her life and mentally abused. And
go ahead, Tony.
And she came in and she was throwing the N-word around, you know, like it was just everyday language. And I pulled her aside in my office and we talked, and I said, look, we really want you to stay here, but you can't use that kind of language. I said that every woman that comes through those doors is hurting. Everyone has a story. And I said, well, long story short, when she left there, her best friend that she made there was another in the shelter, was Black. And they maintained that relationship with others after they left. That's why I'm saying that poverty, survival, homelessness can be a great equalizer. Now, what we're in the process of doing now is reviving the Mobile Union chapter for the homeless. We've got about 16 people that are former members of MUNCH, people that lived in the shelter and people that live in the shelter now that have pledged their support to that. And lastly, and I hadn't shared this with you, Tony, I know I have Christy and Willie, I got a call from a woman who had been formerly homeless in the 80s in Lafayette, Louisiana, had been working with the homeless, and they want to start a chapter of the National Union of the Homeless over there. So this is a movement that is growing.
Okay, Tony.
Relationships are important. We had women that came to the shelter to feed meals. And one woman said, before I came down here, I thought people were homeless was just because they were lazy and didn't care. But I came down here and talked to 3 of the ladies when we ate with them. And I realized that if what happened to her happened to me, I would be homeless too. 56% of the people that are working today are 1 or 2 paychecks away from being homeless. And that number is probably higher because that's an old figure from about 20 years ago. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Tony. Thanks. We're going to hear a lot more from everybody, from all of our speakers and presenters. This is the first. It's not actually the first. We had an event like this a few months back, but we're going to continue this series. As I think everyone has indicated, these discussions are absolutely critical. We're going to have different panelists and different speakers. Everyone, we all hands on deck, for this challenge of what we got to do. So what we want to do now then, I think I covered everyone in terms of our speakers, our panelists, is open it up. I understand from Kristen that we did get a few questions in through the chat. So let's take those first. Kristen, if you could pose the question, and if it's directed to a particular person, they get first shot at it, and then others, panelists can also weigh in. And when we're done with the chat questions, we'll kind of open it up for further discussion. And we'll see how things go. Does that sound good with everybody? Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Kristen.
All right, the first one, and thank you all for these amazing questions. The first one is for Shally. It says, please break down your point that every dollar to a low-income person is turned to $1.30, in contrast to every dollar to a corporation that is a mere 30 cents.
Sure. So I can, maybe Anthony, I can send you that paper afterwards if you want to share it with the participants. But this looked at some of the policies that were implemented during the pandemic and what happened to money that was spent. And so this was from the Brookings Institute, and what they found was that, and this is not new, and this is not new. This happens, every dollar that's spent in food stamps often gets multiplied into more than that dollar. Every dollar that the minimum wage goes up gets multiplied into more than that dollar. And what the Brookings Institute found in the pandemic was that the policies that gave money directly to financially insecure households, to poor and low-income households, many of them, like Reverend Tani is saying, are just one paycheck away from being homeless. Every dollar that they received, they're going to spend it. And so when they spent it, it got translated into more than that dollar in the economy. It generated economic activity. Versus what they also found was every dollar that went to businesses from the pandemic relief only translated into 30 cents. It wasn't actually, it didn't generate additional economic activity beyond that 30 cents. Every dollar went into less than that dollar. When it went to businesses, every dollar went in, multiplied into more than that dollar when it went to poor and low income households.
Thank you so much, Shally. And specifically, the next question to you was just, is there a source that can be cited for that?
Yes, it's a Brookings Institute study. I'll find it and put it in the chat, or I'll send it to you, Kristen, and maybe you can share it.
Perfect, thank you. The next question is for Jeannie. Is there an argument that international law, either common law or ratified covenants, is binding on local governments?
Yes.
Can't hear you,
We
Jeannie.
can't hear you. Went a little bit away from your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Article 6, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution makes ratified treaties domestic law under the Supremacy Clause. Some of the problems with this is that we haven't ratified the economic rights one. I have some theories about how it could be used otherwise, but I think we need to develop interpreting our laws, constitutional laws, consistent with our international obligations. There's a lot of law on that. And I've written extensively on that. And we can, and especially, I think it's especially true that the anti-discrimination or the equal protection clause of the Civil and Political Rights Covenant should be used to interpret our own equal protection clause. So these are hard arguments, but I've made them, and we're fighting for them.
Thank you so much. The next one is to Willie. There's a question on your thoughts on trying to organize the poor and homeless with the working class to bring them up through something like the free food program of the Black Panther Party.
That's okay. Oh.
Willie, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Could you?
You want me to read the question again?
Yeah, if you can, yeah.
Sure. What are your thoughts on trying to organize the poor and homeless with the working class to bring them up through something like the free food program of the Black Panther Party?
Yeah, good question, because we did a comparative study studying the rise of the development of the Panthers and how the Panther was able to organize among the poor Blacks in the Black ghettos. At a certain time in their development, at the height of their development, I think the saying was that every 30 minutes a person in the ghetto was becoming a member of the Panthers. And that was because of their free breakfast programs, their free clinic programs, the programs that met the immediate needs of the people became an organizing tool from which they established relationship with the people who are poor. If you're going to organize the poor, I've been a trade union organizer, just like Tony. We organized the trade unions. It's a different thing, but the use of free clinics and what we call Project Survival, which the Panthers use, is what we used in the Homeless Union and what we're using now as a way to connect up with the immediate needs. So if you're actually organizing the poor, the use of free breakfast program, free food programs, what you can do with churches in terms of, we've had literacy programs, things like that, free clinics. We're trying to work out around the healthcare problems with other groupings, ways in which we can set up free care with a lot of nurses and doctors who are prepared to give up services. We was able to connect up with them and use those immediate needs as an organizing tool, and also to expose the fact that here's a country of plenty. Why should we have to have a free food program? Why should we have to have these kinds of things that help expose just the inequities and the real holes in our system? So organizing among the poor starts with getting in contact with the poor, and setting up these free food programs as part of our organizing drive was essential. It's essential we're going to do that. I don't know if hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome.
Kristen?
Yes, yes.
Could I suggest also, maybe we could hear a little bit from Crystal and maybe from Alicia, where we really had and still have, but at the beginning of the outbreak of the pandemic, moved rapidly into a project survival mode, which really did all the things that Willie talked about. Crystal, maybe you could comment a little bit about our experience there, and Alicia as well, and from Santa Cruz.
Yeah, I can. And so with us, well, the way I was raised part of my life by my great grandma, and it was always, you don't leave the table, you know, you always make enough food for everybody. That includes the family, the neighbors, neighbors. And so prior to COVID, we were serving about 1,400 people food a week. And that was a point of contact. That's, you know, you're serving food, you're having the communication. And then when we created Sac Soup, we now have this mutual aid network, which is basically the same thing. We go out and we serve meals, we bring out necessities, we have a mutual aid storage in which we all work out of. And it's engaged not only our unhoused communities, but it's engaged our community who wants to do something and do more. It's brought in ministry groups, it's brought in, like I have said, like grassroots groups, organizations, businesses, residents, people that have been on the fence and, you know, have been really negative about homelessness. We've also been able to change that narrative in a sense, utilizing this mutual aid. And we've been doing it, you know, without government grants. We've been doing this all based off of community donations. And so I think it's definitely a way to communicate and to build those relationships, and also to build the bridges with the community that has been so broken up from this situation.
Alicia, maybe you could talk a little bit about what we did in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, so I have a lot of background noise for my kids, so I apologize for that. But one thing I can definitely add to the conversation is our organizing. Our main focus as of late from the pandemic has been forcing the city to follow the CDC guidelines. We've noticed that, you know, across the nation, cities have been sweeping during the pandemic, even though it's against CDC guidelines. They've made all kinds of excuses as to why they do that, trying to say that, you know, it's for public interest. They promote all the false narratives around homelessness. And so one thing that we've done is through the court system and lawsuits, we've been successful a couple of times now, forcing the city to follow CDC guidelines. And with that being said, I think the biggest accomplishment in this past year is that we can't count them, but I have no doubt that we've saved lives by doing that. And so I think that's extremely important. And that's the importance of organizing, is that the bottom line is we're not just fighting for our rights, but in doing this, we are saving lives. And so I will just leave it at that. And Anthony, you can talk about it more if you like. I have an ice cream that's kind of melting. Sorry about that. I'm out with my kids right now because I worked all day and we're just now getting dinner.
That's awesome. Thank you, Alicia. So there's two more groups of questions. One is on organizing and one is on law and policy. And I'm grouping a couple together just in the interest of time. The first one asks about, can you help me understand what economic, political, environmental, and social policies are responsible for the persistence and growth of poverty on the planet, is one of them. And the other says, has anyone looked into the homeless laws passed in the late 80s and 90s that were supposed to protect all homeless people of every type, going from couch surfing to living out of vehicles to campers? And the last one is, we have heard tell that Biden has promised to house everyone in 5 years. Is this really true?
Well, okay, I don't, who wants to tackle that very easy question? Who wants to be the first to tackle that?
Shallie, Shallie's smiling. Do you want to hop in there first?
I mean, I'll just say that it can't possibly be true, in part because the estimates that are used typically on homelessness are just far too low. You hear numbers like 500,000, 550,000, like in that range, that are homeless any given night. But, you know, according to when you just start looking at the numbers of people who are living in encampments, who are living, you know, we're looking at, or on the verge of, you know, who have doubled up with family members or friends or other people, you know, we're looking at closer to 8 to 10 million people, and that's before the pandemic. And so there's just, anyhow, I know others on the call will have more to say about that, but, you know, from what I can tell, at least, when you think the problem is only 500,000 people, which is not an insignificant number, but it's actually many times that, then there's no way that the solutions are going to be big enough to address the kind of insecurity that we're looking at.
Yeah, Tony, I'd like to talk about this.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, we had something occur, about 5-6 years ago here in Chicago that speaks right to this point. What happened was there was an increase in homeless kids in the school system. And as a result, some of the teachers, you know, through the union, the teachers union here in Chicago, initiated where they started counting the homeless children. Now, prior to them doing this, they were saying there's only about 7,000 homeless people in Chicago, right? That's what they said. But literally, as they began to interview student after student, and they found out, you know, living in their cars, doubled up with another family member, you know, going from transient hotel to just on the street, all this, they found that there was 137,000 homeless people in the city of Chicago. That was 5% of the population of Chicago. And that did not even include, say, a person who would be homeless but didn't have kids or wasn't connected to somebody with, you know, with kids that were in the school system. And it just completely shattered this notion. You know, the difference between the two, 7,000, 137,000. My God. And so if you take a place like Chicago, we don't even have percentage-wise as many as you got in a place like LA or say Houston or, you know, where there's a warmer climate, Florida somewhere. You know, because it's so cold here. People get the hell out of here. You come homeless, you want to get the hell out of here. You don't want to freeze to death on the street. But if you do the math, 5% of America is 16, 17 million people. So literally it boils down to their counting methods, which they know are woefully wanting because they got to keep that number low. They got to keep it down. Let me say this. There was another thing that happened in January of last year. They did a poll among the Fortune 500 CEOs. And this is before the pandemic hit, before they even knew the pandemic was coming, so to speak, where they said there was definitely going to be a downturn in the economy in 2020. And literally all of them, except for maybe 3%, about 97% of them said, yes, this is going to be, and that they intended to counter it with layoffs. So literally the pandemic comes along, they're able to hide, you know, something that was naturally coming anyway within the pandemic, you know, an economic disaster. And even though here in Chicago, there was supposed to be a moratorium on throwing, no, that did not occur. They were throwing people on the street any damn way. What the numbers are, we don't know, but it's more people homeless now. That 78,000 I gave you, that was pre-pandemic. We don't know what it is now. We know it's higher than 78,000. Right. You know, that's the situation. And it's only going to get worse. But like I say, it boils down to what's the method you're using for counting, and they're not really interested in counting. Oh, the last thing I want to say, one of the things they were talking about last year was in terms of rich folks being able to make money. They felt that in the next decade, this is the same CEOs I'm telling you about, but in the next decade, they felt that a person could make more money in real estate than they could on the stock market. And how they're making real estate is you keep housing units off of the market in a supply and demand manipulative, you know, you're manipulating the market, supply and demand. You keep it off the market till the price goes up, and you flood the market and at that high price and make that money. But you keep places off the market. That shows you how you can have 78,000+ homeless people in the city of Chicago, and then you've got 4 times that many, you know, empty, you know, vacant units.
Right.
Anyway, I hope that answers some of the questions that people asked.
Can I take a quick stab at this really quick? It'll be super
go ahead,
short.
Crystal. Go ahead.
So I think we're like, for part of that question, you know, they were asking different elements. And I think that the biggest part of that, hang on one second. Sorry, guys, my children are walking in. I think where like things that were like originally written in law, like in the 80s, where the catch up now is that we see like local state making ordinances and new little temporary like laws or you know, bans or things like that, to where it makes it impossible to kind of uphold these laws that have been around for a really long time. I know like here in Sacramento, like we have things like the sit-lie ban, we have like the anti-camping ban, even though, you know, it shouldn't be legal, and that's what we're dealing with. And as far as the Biden part, I don't see housing or him housing everybody in 5 years. I mean, at this point, yesterday we won a battle, you know, against just the city of Sacramento for trying to shut down Project Roomkey. So I just don't see, unless they really want to get serious about homelessness and open all of the buildings and stop, you know, messing around, I don't see the housing situation looking any better soon.
Right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take the prerogative of the chair here for a minute, because we're getting close to the end of our scheduled time, and so we want to leave a little time. I think if any of our panelists have it's just a final thought, just for a moment or two, just final thoughts. But before we get to that, and they'll have the last word, I want to say that first of all, we've had between 75 and 95 people on this call for almost 2 hours. I would say that this is a very hopeful sign and an absolute mandate to continue these discussions and broaden these discussions. So I want to thank everyone for hanging in there and listening and making contribution to tonight's event. And the other thing I want to say is that there's no question in our mind, that is for the National Union of the Homeless, that we have reached a fork in the road. That's true for the legal community, that's the progressive legal community, especially around the housing question. And it's certainly true for the issue of housing and homelessness generally. And it's not just a crossroads where you can go left, right, or keep going. We cannot keep going in the same direction. We got to go one way or another. And what we're talking about tonight is that we need to go in the direction of building a movement to empower the poor and the homeless, to chemically enmesh the legal struggle with the practical struggle. Not that one helps the other, but that we're chemically enmeshed for all the reasons that the panelists have given, to weaponize the kind of information that Jeannie was sharing with us, that there are rights, but they're not known. You know, they might appear here and there in a legal filing. But when we bring those to the homeless, you have these rights, then we weaponize that language. We make that the property of those who have the actual entitlement and don't realize they have it. So things sometimes look very bad, but we are optimistic in the union that really it's the system that has the problem. They cannot solve that problem. Joe just gave an example of why you run smack dab into the system, the capitalist system. As soon as you say, we're going to do this and do that, you run smack dab into the realities of the market, of the venture capitalists, of the speculators, of the search for maximum profit. So we're at that fork. We got to start addressing these things in a systemic way, and we got to start really having a complete fusion of the legal aspect and the practical organizing. So I feel very encouraged by tonight. So with that, I think we're going to let everyone know how they can contact both the, it'd be good if people want to put into the chat their respective organizations, their names, both if you're interested. I don't know, Kristen, if there's a way to preserve the chat so that we can get back to people. Okay, go ahead and give us your information. We'll get back to you in terms of ways that you can become closer and be part of what we're doing. We're building out our legal department in the Homeless Union. We're building out the Homeless and Housing Committee of the National Lawyers Guild. And so we're really looking forward to having to augment those aspects of our work. And so with that, let's see if any of our panelists have any, we have just a couple of minutes, see if we have any more closing comments.
Yeah, can people hear me? I just want to say that all of history and history of certainly the homeless and poor who have been organized in this country says that freedom ain't free, that underneath all that we're dealing with is the question of power. They don't give two shits about us. If we don't care about ourselves in terms of organizing ourselves, we ain't gonna get anything. So this idea that they're going to end homelessness, that they're going to get, put money out there to deal with housing. They've done that for years after years after years, coming out with these promises of blueprint to end homelessness and so on. Unless we organize, we're not going to get anything. Power comes from organization. And again, freedom is not free. You only get what you organize to take. If you got a little organization, you get a little thing. But if you got a big problem, you need a big organization. And that's what we're building with the National Union of the Homeless, with the Poor People's Campaign, and all the other efforts of the homeless and poor to organize. Unless we organize, we're not going to get anything. It's no accident that we're the most disorganized, racially segregated, disunited section of the population. And that's why we're constantly driven under, and under. And unless we organize, this system is going to kill us. So if we don't kill the system, it's going to kill us. The only way to kill the system, we got to organize. And like Joe says, the first step in organizing is to organize the organizers. Identify the leaders and people who are committed to stick and stay the course until we can become a force to be reckoned with in this country. And unless that happens, then all of these promises are going to be empty, and don't hold your breath when somebody tell you, well, we're going to end it, we're going to give you some money, and we're going to end poverty. No, this system is about producing poverty. And that means more homelessness unless we change the system, but you can only change the system by organization. I hope people heard me on that one, because that is a main lessons of history.
Right on. Okay, thanks, Willie. Thank you.
Right on, Willie.
You got it. So
Any
other, we want to thank all of our speakers, our presenters, our guest speakers, and our panelists. But let's, if we have, and I also want to recognize we had wanted to have a very broad and diverse panel tonight, so we couldn't include everyone that we wanted to, but we're going to have more. I see Sabina Martin down there in the corner. And so Sabina's going to be
Hey, Sabina.
Yeah, she's down there. And Sabina founded the Boston Homeless Union and is today assisting in the reestablishment of the Massachusetts Homeless Union. We got Paul Johnson. We have a number of our officers, new and old, and everywhere in between, or I should say veteran and junior and everything in between. And so we feel very optimistic about where we're going. So any closing thoughts before we kind of call it a night?
I just want to say, man.
Hey, I got one.
Oh,
Yeah, I got one thing to say. Take one sentence. If they
Go
don't
ahead,
need
Joe.
us, we don't need them neither. Then if these chapters don't need us, guess what? We don't need them either. And there's more us than there is than them.
Okay. All right. Robbie, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, we really fucking need people coming together around the Bay Conservation Development Commission and Caltrans. So people in the state of California, like, you know, I think that's going to drop your information in chat, because we're dealing with the same entities, and we need to start working together on that for these big nebulous bureaucracies that own all this land that our folks are on.
All right. Okay. Anyone else?
I just want to say thank you everyone for coming, and we have to always say nothing about us without us, and so we're going to continue doing this until we have a seat at the table. Thanks everyone for coming.
Okay, thank you, Alicia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Jalisa, as our National Vice President, do you have any closing comment?
Just learned so much from everyone, so I'm just processing everything. So thank y'all for your knowledge.
Okay, thank you, Jalisa. Anyone else? Okay, well, we did.
A good moral fight. We just need to keep up that good
Right on.
moral fight.
That's right. That's right. Okay, well, we did record the event tonight, and we will definitely hope that people share it. We're going to respond to everyone who's put information in the chat, and we're going to reschedule our next gathering like this as soon as it's practical. And with that, I just want to end by thanking our both organizations, co-sponsoring organizations, and say, like we've said for 35 years, and we're saying it louder and more effectively than ever: homeless, not helpless. Homeless, not helpless.
Homeless, not helpless.
Homeless, not helpless. And so
Homeless, not helpless.
thanks so much for everybody's participation, and we'll be seeing you very soon.